Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at 1999 and 2000 SPX football cards. SPX, in 1996, Upper Deck created SPX, which redefined the whole concept of what an ultra-premium brand, a really high-end brand could be. By resetting the table, everybody now had a really good measuring stick to aim for, and boy would they ever. 1997, we saw a lot of response to what they created in 1996. But really, the set that Upper Deck created in 96 was very, very simple. It was holograms. It was a whole set of holograms. That was basically it. And in 1997, they also one-upped that by turning the 1996 set into a really quaint set, because the 97 set was a very impressive set. The design was gorgeous, but it was extremely simple. There was almost nothing to it. And they did have parallels, they did have an insert set, but that was basically the whole point. They just got everything out of the way and focused on a great card. But as they headed into 1998, they were feeling the pressure, and they responded by overthinking the model. And that's what we ran into in 1998, was the cards were now moving away from the very concept, the very simple concept of what SPX was and why SPX was, and stepping into a space of a card set that was working really hard to be something. Unfortunately, in their efforts, they forgot to make a card that was something, and by mid to late 1998, their SPX set had gotten overly bloated and way too convoluted for its own good. It was a 360 card set. Now, these were high-end packs, which means they're very expensive. And collecting a 360 card set is a lot. That's asking a lot. On top of that, all the cards were serial numbered, and they were serial numbered in varying ways, which meant it wasn't as simple as getting all 360 cards. Some of the cards were pretty difficult to get. Plus, you had parallels. You didn't even have inserts. For 1998, the main SPX finite set for 1998, you had to be all in. You had to be willing to spend some serious money to get some serious cards for a serious set. And that was just asking too much. So by 1999, they knew SPX had to be reinvented, reimagined. They had to figure out what it was going to be moving forward. It was still a gold standard set, but it was no longer a viable set. And they had to rebuild it. So for 1999, they started off with a thick card stock like they normally had, but they went away from anything that they'd done before, and they made a card that was truly unique and truly imagined out of almost thin air. That's really what SPX needed to be in this reimagining. And they started off with a card set that was built as a regular card set. So as innovative as the card set itself got out of the way. It was veteran cards and rookie cards. That's it. Now you can just focus on the card. And the card, it's a rainbow holofoil for the entire surface of the card. And the effect actually is really kind of cool. It almost has a 3D effect to it, because the gold foil on the card, it doesn't move in the same way that the light does on the rainbow holofoil. And that means the rainbow holofoil gives a kind of a 3D texture within the card that makes it feel really interesting. The card itself, though, isn't all that interesting. It's a very dark card. It has kind of a border, almost a rind around the side, with a sepia shot of the player, and then that goes around a shot, basically almost a box of the main shot of the player. So the player himself is like a cutout, not affected by any of this effect, but the background around him is. And since the background around him is kind of bright and is in full color, it kind of shines. When the effect goes over the card, it kind of shines in contrast to that rind around the outside, making the card kind of interesting. Now, I say kind of interesting because at the end of the day, these are not cards that are dynamic. They're not cards that are going to jump off the page. If you look in a display case, this is the card you're going to be looking over. You're never going to notice this card. But these cards were not intended to be noticed. They were not intended to be the big flashy card that everybody sees. Really, this is a card for set collectors. That's the core of this. And it is a lot of fun to open packs and pull the cards out and put the set together. Even if it's just a team set, which is very small, it still has a fun quality because there's an interactive quality to it. That's what's really neat about these cards. But at the end of the day, this card set was never supposed to be about these cards. Now, the first two sets were about the holograms, and yes, they had the gold parallel, which also helped, but it was really about the card itself. In 98, they were trying to find ways to give you interest beyond just the main cards. Well, here they continued that tradition of SPX, where they had the base cards, but they also had a parallel set, in this case called Radiance. And the Radiance cards, the gold foils replaced by blue, which creates an even more subdued, kind of moody quality. Looks really cool. I love blue foil. But the main effect is over the entire card surface, where they replace all of the rainbow holofoil with a prismatic effect. And the prismatic effect is a pretty complex one that really is cool. I mean, the whole card comes very lively, and the shot of the player is not affected by it, but you can see him in it. It doesn't completely drown him out, but it makes the card a lot of fun. But this is a parallel, which is all about being a parallel. So again, this is a card set that works really well for set collectors. That's where this is a lot of fun. And every one of these Radiance cards is serial numbered out of 100. So not only is it an interesting parallel, but it does have a really good rarity to it. So great combination. But like I said, this card set was not about just the basic cards. They really needed to make sure that they had a reason for people to rip packs. And for packs as expensive as this, they needed to have a good draw. And the draw came with the rookies. Now, about half of the rookies, a little over half of the rookies, are autographed. So every single card with these rookies, if they come with an autograph, then the autograph is on all of the cards. For the rookies that don't have autographs, obviously they don't have autographs. But the autograph is down at the bottom, not in anything specially prepared. It looks like it's just written on like a fan autograph. But that's the way they come. They either come with an autograph or they come without. And every one of these rookie cards comes individually serial numbered to 1999. Almost. Actually, at the end of the set are the high-end, high-profile rookies, and those rookies are actually serial numbered out of 500. They still have the autographs, but they are serial numbered out of 500. But all of these cards also come with the Radiance parallel, and so in that, the effect is exactly the same. All of the Radiance are numbered out of 100, so it doesn't matter how rare the serial number was within the set. They all are numbered out of 100 here. And none of them have autographs. So the Radiance cards never have autographs. It's only the base level rookies that have autographs. And a couple of the autographs weren't available for packs, so they did put exchange cards in. You may run into one of those, but otherwise, that was the set. I mean, that was literally the set. They didn't bother to do anything else. It was a very simple, straightforward, pull it back, get it right. And that's what they did. They did a brilliant job of getting it right and giving themselves a path forward, moving into the new millennium. But they also wanted to add some more interest by having a lot of insert cards, and boy did they have a lot. They had 6 insert sets, and they also had a 7th semi-set, a non-numbered set that I'll get to obviously at the end. But of these 6 insert sets, they played around with the effects that they were already doing. So in 1999, Upper Deck was playing around with a bunch of stuff. It was kind of like their Pacific phase. And they came up with sets like Ovation, Ionics, Holographics, Retro, just trying some crazy stuff. And it was a lot of fun to see the different things they were coming up with. Well, that's what they were doing here with these insert sets. In a way, almost a Fleer-like approach. They used 3 different effects across the 6 sets. So that means that every effect shows up on 2 different insert sets. And the first insert set is SPX Masters. Now, the Masters card is a nice layout. It's a little bit of detailing, or a little bit of design work, and then a big background that just streams right off 2 sides of the card. Really good focus to it. But they had the effect on it was a grid, and the grid also has a grid of prisms. And this just completely overpowers the card. Now, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I think it gets overdone. I think that this effect is just a little bit too much for this card set. The cards are cool, but when it gets completely overdone, it basically disappears. Now, I don't think that it's at all successful here with Masters, but with Prolifics, I think it, I'm not going to say it works, but the Prolifics card I think is a lot better for this effect, because for the Prolifics cards, they have a whole design around the outside, and then a little box in the middle for the image. And the combination of all those pieces is a really good way of kind of preparing you for the fact that it's a card that is confined. So when the effect runs over the whole card, it's not as jarring as just seeing an image that kind of disappears underneath. I think it's more effective, but regardless, it was an effect that was asking a lot. Fortunately, the Highlight Heroes cards has a very different effect. So Highlight Heroes is a card where it is a background behind the player, but they have a design in it that makes it work a lot better. So it feels like an actual design behind the player of, it gives kind of that feel that works really well for effects. But the effect on this card, the effect is really, really cool because it's a really tight conical prism effect. So it's almost sparkly in a way. And because the player is not really affected by the sparkliness, that gives it kind of like a halo around him that just looks gorgeous. And so the Highlight Heroes cards work really well. But what I like are the XP Excitement cards. The SP Excitement cards use it's basically a full background running off the card. They get the design largely out of the way, and they just let that effect, that spectral effect, dominate the card. And again, because it doesn't overpower, it gives a wonderful balance to the card where, to me, this is the card that is the most effective of all of the inserts. And if they had just used this effect for all of the inserts, I think they all would have looked good, but this effect was great. Which leads me to the last effect. And this is kind of a modeled effect. It's kind of a weird one. So Starscape is the first of the two sets here. This is a lightly designed card, but it has a really nice design. I think that it's got really good detailing. I love the way that they built the Starscape effect. It has a fade over the background behind the player. The whole combination is wonderful. And had they not had the spectral effect over it, I think this would have been a great card. The problem is the spectral effect has a weird look to it that it's a weird look. I'm not a fan of it. But it does look a little bit better than the SP Extreme card, where again they in this case they did something where they had two shots of the player. They have a cutout shot of the player but shrunk down, and then the whole rest of the card is either a portrait or, in most cases, a tight action shot of the player. And the way that works is it's an okay effect. It can work pretty well. It's basically what they were doing with Topps Gold Label. But in this case, because of the spectral effect, the spectral effect primarily dominates the background, which means that big image that's the focus of your eye kind of disappears under this effect that just kind of ruins it. So with some of these inserts, they did really well, but some of them, yeah, not so much. But they did do one other card set, like I said, in the set, which was their winning materials. And winning materials is basically jersey swatches, and in this case, they also have patches of leather, both of them combined in. A couple of these come with autographs, most of them do not, but this was the other thing that they did for this set. Otherwise, they didn't really need to do much. All they were trying to do was to rebuild the model, give themselves a path forward, and kind of apologize to high-end collectors. And I think they did a really good job of all of the things that they needed to do. But they needed this model to give them the path forward, to define it, to say, okay, what is SPX going to be? It's obviously not hologram, so what's it going to be? And this was the foundation. And the sets that would come after this would be the jumping off point. Great thing that they were able to, great way to build it. And this is a lot of fun if you're into set building. This is one of those sets that is built for exactly that. So it's great in that way. So with the template set in place from 1999, they knew basically how to move forward into the year 2000. And the model, since the model was basically built on veterans and rookies and then some inserts, they just needed to kind of tweak how it was going to come across. And this is what they'd done in 1996 and 1997. They'd made basically the same set, they just made a newer version in 1997. And in a way, that was almost a scary thing here with their forward movement. They'd have to make sure to kind of reimagine it every single year. And in the first year, they didn't really reimagine very much. The cards themselves, they're a little bit thinner. They still have the rainbow holofoil on it, but they didn't do it in the same way. This is actually a white card, and then it has the gold foil, but it has the word SPX along it, and then they have a big X. And the SPX and the X all have rainbow holofoil in it. So that is the interest of the card. And while it's kind of cool, it's a boring card. That's kind of the big problem they ran into with this card. The previous year, there was a lot of interest in the card. It didn't look dynamic, but at least it had interest. Here, this card was kind of dynamic. This is a card that's going to jump out to you. It is going to stand out, but it's not going to really intrigue you and kind of hold you in. So it's a better card, but it's a more boring card. But I do have to note that on the card back, the card number, why do they use the card numbers like this? This is horrible. It's really difficult to read these card numbers. Just kind of a warning. It's not a benefit of these cards, but they were going with that kind of technical, mechanical text, and that's kind of what they ended up with. But the cards, they still have a parallel, like the previous year, where Radiance was the parallel the previous year with blue foil. Well, here they went with Spectrum, and the parallel actually has a red foil. So it's a stronger, it works better with the white. And here it comes through very well in terms of replacing all the gold. But the big thing was they replaced all of the holofoil with a raindrop effect. And it is a really powerful effect. The red detailing, the ruby effect is gorgeous. And then they have the raindrop effect, which is an amazing complement. And the combination together makes this a really great card. So like in the previous year, they were really thinking about the parallel. Here, they very much were really thinking about the parallel. And unlike the previous year where the parallel is fairly common because there are 100 copies of each, here there are only 25. So it's a lot more rare. They were really kind of pairing things in. But they did follow the same models the previous year, veterans and rookies. But while in 1999 they had 3 different rookies, they had no autograph rookies numbered out of 1999, autographed rookies numbered the same way, and autographed rookies numbered 500. Here they had actually 2 groups. Well, actually they did have 3, but we'll get to that. So the basic level of rookie cards these are the mid-tier rookies, the rookies that might have a chance. It'll be interesting to follow them. The cards are basically the same as the main cards, the veteran cards. The big difference is they don't have that big X. Otherwise, they still have SPX across the front. They do have an X in the design. So they have a streak of color down into a fade to white, and then they have some dots coming in from the other side. So they did integrate an X into the design, and it's kind of tough to notice, but at least they did kind of put it in. But the significance of these cards is the fact that they're all numbered out of 1,350. So they're actually kind of rare. They're more rare than in the previous year. And the cards do still come with the Spectrum parallel. So obviously in this case, since there's less rainbow holofoil, the effect of the raindrops, that is a spectral effect that takes up very little room on the card. So it's kind of a letdown. That effect is really cool, and it's really the big motivating factor in the set. But at least with these rookies, they do have some good rookies that were in this class, so that kind of holds it up. And the rookie cards do look pretty cool. But the big thing of all of these cards in this set is the next tier, which is the jersey autograph swatches. Every single one of these cards has a jersey swatch in it, so they're really thick, and they have autographs on them. Every single card, interestingly, is numbered out of 2,000. So these cards, theoretically, are more common than the previous cards, and it's very rare that the autographed cards are the more common ones, but that's how it worked out. Now, one thing you might notice on this card, they don't have any holofoil. Well, they actually do. They replaced all the gold foil with holofoil. So that was the only holofoil that appeared on this card. Otherwise, it's a very simple, bold, straightforward effect with no big X in it because the material itself is the effect. So that's how these cards ended up working. But these do have the parallel, and the parallel is all in this case, the holofoil turns to red, and these cards are also numbered out of 25. So all of the parallels are numbered out of 25. But unfortunately, there's no raindrop effect on these parallels because they didn't have the fields of holofoil to use for it. So it's just the ruby is The ruby detailing is the only thing of note. But I did say there's kind of a third. The last 3 cards in the set are actually numbered out of 500 rather than out of 2000, which is like what they'd done in the previous year, only there were more in the previous year. So those 3 cards are numbered out of 500, all the others are numbered out of 2000. But this was really kind of the key to what people were collecting. And also in keeping with the previous year, they had 6 insert sets and a materials set. Unlike 1999, where they used 3 different spectral effects across the 6 sets, here they only use 2. So it's not as adventurous in a way. The first set is SP Excitement, and it's optimistically named. A very rigidly designed card, very structured, and the effect in it is, unfortunately, is kind of constrained. So it's a grid effect with a bunch of diamonds inside that, boxes of diamonds that kind of fade in and out. And with the rigidity of this card, it doesn't really work because the linear nature of the outside and the box nature of the effect kind of cancel each other out to make kind of a lackluster opportunity for this effect. Now, the Highlight Heroes card, this actually works a little bit better, but in a weird way. The design of the card is a bunch of spheres, and then the effect is a bunch of squares with diamonds, and the two kind of cancel each other out. They're both ugly, and by fighting each other, the card actually kind of backdoor works in a way. So, okay, all right, kind of a weird situation, but the Powerhouse cards, here I think it actually does kind of work. The Powerhouse card, a very simplistic card, is basically a top portion and a lower section that's a little smaller, or a lot smaller, and there's nothing more to it. And then you have the pattern on top, and the way that the two work, they actually kind of work together in terms of the fighting dynamism, and I think this works well enough. For this pattern, this is not a pattern that's easy to work with. And I think that this is the one card where that actually does kind of work out in a positive way. But that was the first 3 set of inserts. Then you have Prolifics. And Prolifics starts off the other group. And this is the pattern here for the last 3 is the same pattern that was used in the Radiance parallel in the previous year. They're using almost an identical pattern. There's a slight difference between them, but otherwise it's pretty much the same. And it was kind of an overpowering effect on the actual card set in 1999. Not detrimentally, but it was one that was kind of tough to work with. Well, here it actually does pretty well work. So I definitely give them credit for that. Kudos for that. It looks kind of cool, but primarily on this card. So in the case of Prolifics, the card is very underdeveloped. That's really kind of the key to it. And so it allows that big field of the effect to work well on its own. But there's enough gold detailing around the outside that it does kind of pull your eye and create a balance. And so the combination of all of the elements on this card, I think, work well and about as well as you could expect for any card with these very bold patterns they're using to work out. Then they have SPX Stream, and this is kind of a train wreck affair. It's not a terrible card, because this spectral effect is pretty cool, so that works. But they got a lot going on the inside. So to me, this is where the spectral effect saves the card from itself. That's about what I got to say for that. And then you have Starscape. And in the case of Starscape, this is an under-designed card. Basically, they erased out the outer portion and then left just kind of a colored box in the middle. And that's where the card actually works, because it means that now the spectral effect is primarily around the outside like a border, and then it kind of disappears toward the inside, so that the effect of the design of the card works with the effect of the pattern on the outside to kind of balance each other out and make a pretty good card. None of these are great. None of the inserts here rose to the level of the previous year. So it was definitely time that they were going to have to make a change, but at least there was one thing that was clearly far and away a huge improvement in 2000, and that was their winning materials. Now, the materials, swatches, the jerseys, the footballs, etc., I've always been fascinated by it because it is dumb. You're not really getting any jersey that is of significance. You're just getting a piece of fabric and maybe a piece of wood or a piece of shoe, or in this case, a piece of football leather. It's just material. Why do we care? But for some reason we do. And so for me, all I look at it is, hey, there's something else on the card. There's something interesting. And that's basically all there is to the card. So it's a big, thick card with some things in it, which is fine. But in this case, it's not about showcasing the actual materials. They're just kind of buried into the card. This is about a gorgeous card design. I mean, this is a magnificent card design. To me, this is hands down one of the best material cards ever designed. I've always loved how these cards look. And some of these cards actually do come with autographs. Or let me change that. There are two versions of these, or there are two sets of these cards. There are cards without autographs and there are cards with autographs. Not all the players who have autographs have unautographed cards, and likewise. So think of it as two different sets. There is one set with the materials with no autographs, and there's a whole nother set of largely different players that do have autographs, and they're all individually numbered. Some players show up in both sets. That's the best way to think of it. Some players actually have two copies of the card, but assume that most players do not. Kind of the way it works. But that was the follow-up year. That was 2000. That's where they took the model of 1999 and they made their first evolution. I think it was a very successful evolution. It was something where they explored one area to go in, and they presumably learned some things. They definitely learned that the inserts weren't doing very well, so they were going to have to really rethink that model. But this was a constant evolution, and they had the base to work with, and this was the first iteration. I'm not going to look at 2001, 02, 03. I'm not going to look at that yet. I want to look at that in another video. I just want to focus on these two sets, because this was the reinvention of SPX, and it was the transition into the new millennium. So here we are. We've come to the end of the 20th century. We're heading into the 21st century, and that's going to be a whole new exploration. And it will be, there will be some bumps and bruises along the way, but at least these two card sets came out really well. They're fun sets. They're fun sets to collect, and they are. I've always enjoyed them myself. So that's what I've got for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you haven't subscribed already, definitely do so. Check out my other videos. And yeah, thank you very much for watching.